Hi, welcome for Tyler, and for me, this is 2024. And so we're starting a whole new collection of videos, and we hope that you will find them interesting. Tyler, we were just talking a little bit about some of the importance of archaeology, of history, of the Bible, and you were sharing with me your story with a friend.
Yeah, I had a friend, he had a huge renewal of faith. He sold his beekeeping equipment, his bees, his chickens, because he said, I was trying to fit 3,000 years of activity into 85. And he said he wanted to live for the things of God. And as he's tried to do that, he's ran into 1,000 questions. And one of the biggest questions is, how do we trust the Old Testament? How can we trust that it's reliable, it's a historical account? And the reason why that really became prominent is I said, as you do ministry and as you try to grow, you're going to have to focus your faith on the Word and the person of Jesus. So then the question becomes, is the Word trustworthy? If I'm supposed to center my faith on Jesus, who's only testified to in the Word, how do I really trust what it says?
Yeah, that is so important. And I think all the more important in our day and age. So what we want to do in the series that we're now going into is look at archaeology, history, and the Bible. And I hope you'll join us for some of these, I think, really exciting sessions. Okay, welcome back, Tyler. We were just looking at these, what I think are some of the most important finds, archaeological discoveries of the last year of 2023, and looking at these Amorite-Akkadian bilinguals. We just talked about the texts a bit, and a little bit about the language. So I think what we want to do now is look at the contents of this Amorite material, which is so unique. If this is the Amorite language, which seems to be the case, and there are a number of reasons for that we'll see as we go through this, then this is truly the first time we actually have a language that sounds like what Abraham and Sarah and others may have actually spoken and heard and understood as their own language. So we'll look at some of the contents of these tablets. The first 10 lines of the first tablet contain the name of gods and goddesses, and we'll look at those to see what kinds of religion and what kinds of deities were worshipped by Abraham and Sarah and their families before they came to know the one true God. And then there are a few lines of stars, and there's some lines of different foods and things like this. And then there are lines of clothing, and then we go into what are actual phrases. It's almost like if you were going to learn a language. I know when I learned German in high school, or tried to, what we would do is we would learn phrases and memorize those, and then that would help us to put things together. And tablet 2 is entirely of phrases like that. So let's begin with divine names, with names of gods and goddesses. And I think this is pretty important, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because you understand the name of the God, you get to understand the character of the God, I think.
Yeah, you were talking about, I think earlier with me, one very special situation.
Are you talking about Abraham with the father?
No, something that you experienced today, just recently. I think it was parents naming their child.
Oh, yeah, I had a friend. Yeah, I had a friend back home name his child Odin.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I think Norse religion is interesting. I'm Norwegian, very Norwegian. I think my test said I'm like 96% Scandinavian, 76% of that is Norway. And it seems like where I'm from, Minnesota, that culture is becoming more and more prominent. So on the one hand, I respect it. There's been famous documentaries about it and reality TV shows like The Last Kingdom. But there's also something that kind of feels tragic about it because it feels like it's paying homage to an old deity, or like this kid might grow up thinking the truest thing is Norse religion, or like maybe that's what I should focus on and value versus God, versus Jesus.
Yeah. Yes, and of course this is a change and reflects a transition in our own culture in terms of what is happening. And as we look at these names of gods and goddesses, I believe we may well be looking at what are some of the most important deities to those people who were of the family and community of Abram and Sarah. So we're going to start with a little bit of a background here, just to understand. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, we read in verse 2, Joshua said to, chapter 24, Joshua's renewing the covenant with the people. And they start that by talking about how the people have come to follow God and God has been faithful to them. But Joshua goes all the way back to their ancestors, Abraham and Sarah. Well, let's read verse 2. Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods." So what were those other gods, and how did they continue to be part of the life and culture, challenging Israel, Abraham and his descendants, but also various other ways they appear? Well, interestingly enough, the very first god on the first line is Dagon. Dagon was the chief god, perhaps, of the Amorite pantheon of all the gods. He's mentioned in some of these cities and places that we mentioned already where Amorite tablets are found, like Ugarit, along the sea in Syria, along the Mediterranean Sea, Amar inland farther north up the Euphrates, in Israel as well. He's mentioned as a god connected with the Philistines. You may remember the story, how the Philistines are involved in this way with Dagon. In fact, if we move forward, we read in Judges 16:23, "Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice." You remember this story. This is a story of Samson, and how Samson defeated the Philistines. Then they all got together and they convinced his girlfriend, Delilah, to persuade him to tell the secret of his weakness, and he did, and his hair, and they took him captive. They blinded him, and they took him to their temple of their god, Dagon, and they had a big festival. And the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." Of course, that didn't work so well for them because, as we know, Samson's hair grew back, and even while he was in that temple, he literally brought down the house as he regained his strength and pulled the pillars down and destroyed many of the Philistine leaders of that time. But the point there is Dagon continues to be a chief god among different peoples around Israel. And in 1 Samuel 5:2, we have another example of Dagon where the Philistines are at war with Israel. And the sons of Eli, the priest at that time, they bring out the Ark of the Covenant. They think the Ark is the box where God is in it. So the God of Israel they have him in a box so they can control him. So they bring him out to the battlefield. And the Philistines see this and they're scared. But they say, well, we've got to fight anyway. The Israelites are convinced that now God will protect them, but you can't put God in a box. It doesn't work that way. And so the Philistines defeat the Israelites. They take the Ark of the Covenant. They kill the sons of Eli who brought it out. And they take the Ark of the Covenant to their god, Dagon, again in a temple, not the same one, another one at this point. And there they set the Ark of the Covenant, a symbol of the God of Israel, in the temple with Dagon towering over him as a statue. Sure enough, the next morning when they go into the temple, the statue of Dagon has fallen down. His hands are broken. He is divided into many different pieces. And so, as it says, they carried the ark into Dagon's temple there in 1 Samuel 5:2-3, and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. It gets almost comical because they try all kinds of different things and move the ark around, and eventually they return it to Israel because anywhere it goes, it creates bad problems either for their gods and idols or for them. But Dagon here is seen as a major god. That's in line 1. In line 2 of this tablet, we have another big god that they're associated with, and that god is Kamish. Kamish becomes better known later on. Well, it's found in a lot of different places, but it becomes Chemosh, the chief god of Moab, the country during the monarchy that lies to the east of Israel, across the Dead Sea on the other side in what is today Jordan. And Chemosh, of course, is this chief deity there. And he is mentioned a number of places in Numbers 21, when Israel is trying to pass through the Moabite land, and they come and Balak, the king of Moab, hires Balaam, a prophet for hire who comes from Syria, comes down and Balak says, curse these Israelites for me. And Balaam says, okay, I'll do what I can, but he winds up blessing the Israelites and cursing the Moabites. And that's what we read in Numbers 21:29. Woe to you, Moab, you are destroyed, people of Chemosh. He has given up his sons as fugitives and his daughters as captives to Sihon, king of the Amorites. And Chemosh remained a major god for Moab. In fact, during the time of Solomon, when he would marry so many of the princesses from other countries to establish covenants with them, which wasn't God's will and shouldn't have done, but in 1 Kings 11:7, we read, on a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab. Because these high places, these temples for these other gods were kind of like embassies, where the trade and everything else was involved and engaged in that time.
And it says detestable. Is that from what I've read of the Bible, I believe there was child sacrifice involved with Chemosh. Why is it detestable?
Yeah, well, the Moabites are known for sacrificing. Yeah, well, for a whole bunch of reasons, including the fact that there is no true God such as Chemosh. But in 2 Kings 2 and 3, we read about how the king of Moab offered his son on the walls to drive away the Israelites and Judeans, and particularly the Edomites, who they joined with. And of course, that kind of human sacrifice to gods and goddesses was considered detestable.
Well, it is detestable.
Yeah, it really is.
The Norse religion, there was I believe 7 or 9 years, there was human sacrifice at the tree of Yggdrasil.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, it just goes to show you. Well, what happens is that many people, as they develop their own religious beliefs and faiths apart from the God of Israel, what happens is these people come to believe that they have to sacrifice more and more valuable living creatures. So they may begin with animals, sacrificing them, but they soon move on to people who they sacrifice, and infants often, because they kind of have the most life in them, coming just newly born. And so you have that kind of an experience. It's really terrible, but it's really part of the larger Canaanite religion of that time.
So the progression of false religion is you start maybe with a false god and some sacrifices, maybe trees or maybe like plants or some maybe produce, but it just gets increasingly more valuable. To the point where you're sacrificing children.
Yeah, in order to more and more persuade the gods that you're sacrificing to. We see this perhaps most clearly in one of the ports that the Canaanites created, and that is the famous port of Carthage in North Africa, where the high place has been excavated. And what they find is they find jars with sacrifices, in some cases of animals, but in many cases of children. Who are in fact offered there. And it goes on, this high place, for acres and acres. And so you clearly see that this was something that was going on in the Canaanites, among the descendants of the Canaanites as well. Sadly, yes, and that's what we have here. Well, we go on now to line 3, the third god, and here we come to a goddess, the goddess Asheratum. And this goddess is known, a lot is known about her in the myths from a few centuries later at Ugarit and also elsewhere. But Asheratum is known as Asherah in the Bible, and where the T at the end becomes an H as the grammar changes. And we know of this. She's known in the northeast Sinai, where a kind of probably what they call a caravanserai, a place for sort of a hotel for people traveling through could stay and they would be safe. But there's a whole chamber there, a whole area there where there are offerings and where there are texts and places being people are mentioning the goddess's name, Asherah, who is that goddess who is named there. And of course, she's mentioned in Israel as well. In fact, if we look, we see she's mentioned in Exodus 34, where God commands from early on Israel, there at Mount Sinai, he says, break down their altars, that of the false gods, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. Now, the word is poles is used there because it's a wooden stick. You can cut it down, you can burn it, you can do different things with it. But that wooden stick symbolizes in the temple or high place, it symbolizes the tree of life. Asherah is seen as a fertility goddess giving life. And so this pole becomes a symbol of worship to her, just as sometimes the stones are connected with the male god. And in 2 Kings 23, one of the last kings of Judah, Josiah, we read how he smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles and covered the sites with human bones, the bones of the priests and who worshipped here. So he very much desecrated the site and rejected this kind of false worship. And we find that on the Amorite bilingual with Akkadian, that the Babylonian equivalent for this goddess's name of Asheratum is a goddess by the name of Belit Eli in Babylonian, meaning lady of the gods. And that's exactly what Asherah is. At Ugarit, she is the wife of the chief god El, and she is the mother of the pantheon there. And in Israel, although in the biblical text she is sometimes associated with Baal among the Canaanites, among the Israelites there was a whole group of people who believed that she was the wife of Yahweh. They didn't believe that Yahweh was just one God and there were no other gods or goddesses, but they believed that Yahweh was like the state god, the big one you went to for important things, and your local Baals and things like this were what you worship on your day-to-day needs, but the defense of the realm, as it were, was left with Yahweh and his consort, Asherah, and they were maybe the mommy and daddy of all the other gods and goddesses. So you have this picture here that emerges as we understand a little bit more about Asherah and her background going all the way back to even the time of Abram and Sarah. They would have known of her.
You know, this puts something heavy on my heart. As you said,
Yeah.
back then, God Yahweh was seen as the chief god, maybe the El. So you have this kind of combination of Israelite religion, true religion, God, who is the real and living God, this false religion and beliefs, and how they start to get smashed together. So yeah, Yahweh is real, but then so is Asherah. Then she's actually married to Yahweh, and that's important so that we can kind of control our lives through this old religion and not fully depend on Yahweh, but we can believe in Yahweh and then have our own way with smaller matters. And it just reminds me of the ways in which I have been tempted and have fallen into not choosing God's way, even the minutiae, even the smallest thing of my life, and then how that leads me astray, how that brings trouble and brings problems.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a good place maybe for us to end this particular segment.
Good.
Because with Asherah, we also see and are challenged to the different ways that we bring in our own superstitions, our own trust in ourselves and in what we do and create instead of a trust